About a month ago now, EA Sports dropped some huge news on us, the return of NCAA football games that we all know and love. Now, we've been begging for these games to come back for years now, and most of us had lost hope until this announcement. The game is going to be called EA Sports College Football. They are dropping the NCAA name, but as far as we know, the game should pretty much be the same. Now, we've got more news to cover about this game today, and there's going to be tons of news leading up to the release, so if you don't want to miss out on any of it, make sure you subscribe, turn the bell icon on, so that you're always up to date when these videos drop. Today, we're going to be going over the release date, some more schools that have opted out of the game, and some other things going into effect, like rule changes that could actually benefit the game. So the first thing we're going to cover is the release date. A lot of people are wondering when it's coming out. Some people think it's coming out this year because it was announced this year. Some people are thinking 2022. Well, we've got some info on that. Matt Brown dropped some info on Twitter, and he's been dropping a lot of news since the announcement of this game. He's been keeping us in the loop, and he had this to say. According to internal documentation from the CLC that I obtained via open records request, the CLC told FBS institutions that EA Sports intends to release the new video game in July of 2023. Now, this is exactly what I personally expected. 2023 always seemed like the most logical release date. I was hopeful that maybe they could do it by 2022, but typically when you're starting something new in the video game world, it's usually like a 2 to 3 year process from announcement, so 2023 just made the most sense. Now, it's not a totally new thing, of course. They've done NCAA games in the past. They have Madden now, so there's things that they can build off of, but there's still a lot of things that need to be redone, and hopefully they don't actually build too much off of Madden. Hopefully they kind of rebuild some new things with this. I would rather that, and I think many people would as well. But the bigger thing here is it's actually good that it's not going to release until 2023, because that almost guarantees that the game will have name, image, and likeness for the players, meaning the players will look like their real life counterparts, have real names, and all of that stuff. Because as of right now, if the game were to release today, EA Sports would not be able to do that. The players would be auto-generated, they would be fake. And the reason being for this is because the name, image, and likeness rules have not gone into effect for the NCAA yet, and if EA were to use players that look too much like their real counterparts, they could risk being sued like they were in the past. Now, even if the game were to release today, it would still have real teams, real logos, real mascots, real stadiums, real traditions of these programs, probably even real coaches. It would just have auto-generated players. Now, this wouldn't be that much different from old NCAA games, because as most of you remember, old NCAA games didn't have real player names. It did have image and likeness for some of the bigger name players, so the players did look like themselves and they had their real jersey number, but this wasn't the biggest deal breaker, because even if we had auto-generated players, it's not that big of a deal with a college game, because if you're playing a dynasty mode, for example, which is the biggest part of the college football games, after 3 to 4 years, you have a whole new roster of players anyway. It's not like the NFL where players are playing for 10 and 15 years. In college, every 3 to 4 years, you have a completely new team. But if we had to choose, we would definitely want the real players in the game when the game's released. We would want to play with the guy that looks just like Trevor Lawrence or whoever that guy is at the time of this game being released. So this is a plus. This gives EA Sports about 2.5 years for the name, image, and likeness rules to go into effect so that we could have real players in the game. And the Notre Dame athletic director expects the name, image, and likeness rules to actually be finalized going into this next college football season. But if for whatever reason there was some delay and it happened next football season, well, that would still give EA Sports a full year to work out these negotiations with the players or with the NCAA athletes as a whole. It would probably be dealt with as a whole. They would be represented by somebody because it would just be easier to deal with it that way. This gives EA Sports plenty of time to work out those deals, even if there is a delay. Now, there's been some schools opting out. We already knew that Notre Dame opted out for this very reason. They're siding with the players and they don't want to be a part of the game until the players can be fairly compensated for their name, image, and likeness. Well, there's been some more schools that have added on to this. Northwestern, Fresno State, and Tulane are the latest schools that have opted out of the game for that exact same reason. Now, even if this stuff doesn't go into effect and these schools do opt out of the game, it's still not going to completely make or break the game, because it is confirmed that well over 100 of the schools are going to be in the game, because the far majority of schools are represented by the CLC, which EA Sports has an agreement with. There's only about 12 schools that don't fall under the CLC, Notre Dame being one of them, so of course there would be some schools that wouldn't be in the game depending, but the far majority of schools are going to be there. In fact, I covered this in a previous video. I'll link it below in the pinned comment. It covers all the teams and divisions and stuff like that that will be in the game, and some of the teams that are still kind of on the fence. So if you want to be informed on that, you can watch the previous video. But with these name, image, and likeness rules going going into play, it looks like a lot of these schools will actually opt in. This is what the Notre Dame athletic director said. Student athletes deserve to have the same rights as other students on campus. At the end of this, we'll get to some resolution and student athletes will have name, image, and likeness rights, and I'm confident that they will have them going into next season. Fresno State's athletic director said this: Fresno State will not participate in this new video game platform until there is some resolution as to how we as an industry are collectively moving forward with the governing aspects of name, image, and likeness in a manner that truly respects the contributions of student athletes. Now, when these name, image, and likeness rules go into play, these athletes can now be paid for things like signing autographs, maybe selling memorabilia, and yes, appearing in a video game. They're not being paid to actually play football for the schools, but they can basically monetize them themselves as a brand, which is a good thing. So once these go into play, we should see these schools opting in, and that means we should have real players in the game, plus we shouldn't have really any opt-outs. Now, with all that being said, there are still a few other schools that are on the fence, that are undecided, schools that are not covered under the CLC, or schools that just don't want to be a part of the game as of right now for any number of reasons, and two of these big schools are USC and Michigan, two huge programs. Now, USC did put out a statement that said, we have not reached a licensing agreement with EA Sports and the CLC that is acceptable to USC. That's the only thing we've heard from them. And then we've also saw another tweet from Matt Brown on Twitter that said, I've been told that Michigan is also currently undecided as to whether they will participate. I know of several other high-profile programs that haven't made a decision yet too. Now, with USC, I definitely think they'll be in the game just for the simple fact that they've been a part of Madden over the past couple years. They've been in the face of the franchise mode where they have the real team name, the logos, the uniforms, and all of that. They are a playable school in the face of the franchise mode in Madden, so they've already done a deal with EA Sports, so I don't really think that they would be against doing another deal. They maybe have just not come to an agreement, which is what it said. They didn't come to an agreement that they like yet, so maybe that just means they want more money. Remember, if you watched the previous video, USC is not covered under the CLC, so EA Sports has to deal with them directly. Now again, there's already over 100 schools that are definitely going to be in the game, so any way it shapes up, it's not a huge worry, but you definitely don't want to have too many schools like a Notre Dame, USC, Michigan being out of the game because there's such big programs that's definitely going to hold weight. There's a lot of USC fans, there's a lot of Notre Dame fans, there's a lot of Michigan fans. They want to be able to play with their team in this game. There's a lot of people that would not buy this game if they could not play with their favorite team. I'm an LSU fan. If LSU wasn't going to be in the game, that would take away a lot of excitement of the game for me. Now, among those schools, there are some other schools that are still officially undecided. Those include Kentucky, BYU, Hawaii, and Duke. Now again, by the time this game comes out in 2.5 years, probably all these schools are going to be opted in. The name, image, and likeness rules will be in place, which will cover teams like Notre Dame, Northwestern, Tulane, and Fresno State. For these other teams that are on the fence like USC and Michigan, it's probably more so just a money thing. If EA Sports has to pay up a little extra, I'm sure they're going to do it if it means having two huge programs in the game. And then your other schools like Kentucky, BYU, Hawaii, and Duke, I'm sure it's probably similar things with just money. At the end of the day, the amount of teams that are not going to be in the game, if there are any, are going to be very, very small compared to the amount of teams that's going to be in the game. I would have to guess if there's going to be an amount of teams that aren't in the game, at most it's going to be 4 to 6 teams that wouldn't be in the game. And as long as it's not any of the truly huge programs, I don't really see it being a problem. But ideally, everything will be finalized in 2.5 years. It gives EA Sports plenty of time to work all this out for the new rules to go into effect and for us to hopefully have a good football game. And that's really the biggest thing at the end of the day, is the football game going to be good, because we've seen where Madden has gone over the past few years, definitely on a downward trajectory. However, at the end of NCAA, they were on an upward trajectory, even though Madden was starting to trend down. So it's a completely different game than Madden. Are they going to have stuff like Ultimate Team? We expect it, but they're also going to have Dynasty, Road to Glory. And I think the thing that makes the NCAA games better to a lot of people than the Madden games is just how much deeper they were with the offline modes and just how much more fun the college atmosphere was. As long as EA can still nail those things, which I think they will, there's no way they can bring back a college game that has a super bland Dynasty mode and horrible environments. If they bring that back, there's no game. Like, that's the entire aspect of those NCAA games. So I think they'll be able to nail those things, hopefully, and we will have a good game. But right now, this is the latest news. Again, make sure you subscribe, bell icon on if you want to stay up to date. And as always, I will see you guys next time.